My boyfriend proposed to my best friend in public, so I kissed a stranger, unaware he's a Korean Mafia. I should have known something was wrong the moment Daniel asked me to wear red. He'd never cared about what I wore before, never noticed dresses or lipstick shades or the way I curled my hair when I was nervous. But that evening, standing in my apartment doorway with his hands tucked awkwardly into his coat pockets, he smiled too brightly and said, "Red suits you. Wear that one. The tight one." The one he once said made me look too noticeable. I laughed it off. I didn't want to be suspicious. I'd waited 3 years for this man to choose me fully, 3 years of shared rent, shared groceries, shared excuses. 3 years of watching my friends get engaged while Daniel said things like, "We're still young, and what's the rush?" So when he invited me to a rooftop restaurant downtown, the kind with glass railings and city lights spilling like diamonds, I let myself believe. Tonight was different. The elevator ride up felt endless. My heart thumped in my ears as the doors opened to soft music, candlelit tables, and a skyline that looked like a promise. A string quartet played near the bar. People were dressed beautifully. The air smelled like champagne and anticipation. Daniel held my hand. His palm was damp. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just excited." We were guided to the center table. The table. The one with rose petals scattered across white linen, the one perfectly positioned beneath hanging fairy lights. I laughed, breathless. "Daniel, what is all this?" He smiled but didn't answer. Instead, he glanced toward the entrance. I followed his gaze. That's when I saw Lena. My best friend walked in wearing ivory. Not cream. Not beige. Ivory. The same shade she once said she'd wear when the love of my life proposes. She froze when she saw us. Or maybe when she saw him. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes instantly. I felt a strange tightening in my chest. "Did you invite Lena?" I asked, forcing a smile. "You know she hates surprises." Daniel squeezed my hand once. Art. Before I could say anything else, he stood. The music softened. People turned. I stood too, confused laughter bubbling out of me as my mind scrambled to catch up. Phones appeared. Whispers rippled through the air. Daniel reached into his pocket. My heart slammed so hard I thought I might pass out. This is it. Every fight. Every compromise. Every night I cried silently while he slept. All of it suddenly felt worth it. He dropped to one knee. Gasps exploded around us. My hands flew to my mouth. "Oh my God," someone whispered nearby. Daniel opened a small velvet box. The diamond inside caught the light, blinding and perfect. I was already crying when he spoke. But then, he turned. Not toward me. Toward her. The world tilted. "Lena," Daniel said, his voice shaking, not with nerves, but with emotion I had never heard him use for me. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were the one. I tried to fight it. I tried to be responsible. But loving you has been the most honest thing I've ever done." My ears rang. Someone laughed softly, thinking it was part of the show. Lena sobbed openly now, hands shaking as she stepped closer. Daniel continued, "I know this isn't how people expect things to happen. But love doesn't follow rules." Then he said the words that erased me. "Will you marry me?" The silence afterward was violent. I felt myself sway. Lena nodded through her tears. "Yes, yes, Daniel. 1,000 times yes." Applause exploded. Cheers. Whistles. Phones zoomed in on them, on their kiss, on the ring sliding onto her finger. No one looked at me. Not the waiters. Not the guest. Not even Lena. I stood there, still wearing red, still smiling stupidly, still holding a hand that had already let go. My legs moved before my brain did. I walked. Past the table. Past the roses. Past the strangers celebrating my humiliation like entertainment. I didn't run. Running would have meant I cared. The elevator doors closed on the sound of applause. Only then did I break. The bar downstairs was dimmer, quieter. I slid onto a stool like a ghost and ordered something strong I didn't even taste. My reflection in the mirror looked unreal, lipstick perfect, eyes hollow, hands shaking around a glass I barely felt. Best friend. Boyfriend. They planned this. The clothes. The location. The timing. The red dress wasn't for romance. It was for spectacle. Tears finally spilled, but I wiped them away angrily. I refused to sob in public. That's when I felt it. A presence. Not loud. Not invasive. Just steady. "Don't cry," a deep voice said beside me. "Come." Certain. "They don't deserve it." I turned. And the world shifted again, this time in a way I didn't understand yet. He was tall, dressed simply in black, his posture relaxed but controlled. His face was sharp in a quiet way, No wasted movement, no wasted emotion. His eyes were dark, unreadable, and locked on mine as if the rest of the room didn't exist. Something about him felt dangerous. Something about him felt safe. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I stood, grabbed his collar, and kissed him. Art. The bar went silent. Somewhere upstairs, my ex-fiancé celebrated his engagement. And I kissed a stranger who didn't pull away. I had no idea that in that moment, my life had just left the shallow end forever. The bar went silent. Not the dramatic kind of silence you hear in movies, but the uncomfortable, breath-held kind. The kind where everyone pretends not to stare while staring anyway. My lips were still pressed to his when reality rushed back. Warm, firm, steady. The stranger didn't taste like alcohol. He tasted like control. For half a second, I wondered if he'd push me away. If he'd laugh. If he'd humiliate me the way Daniel had, only quieter, sharper. Instead, his hand came up. Not greedy. Not desperate. He rested it on my waist like he'd already decided I belonged there. The kiss deepened, not rushed, not sloppy. It wasn't about spectacle anymore. It was about grounding. About stealing my breath back from the night that had stolen everything else. I heard whispers behind me. Oh my God. Is that her? Is she kissing? I pulled away first. My heart pounded violently as I stared at him, embarrassed fury and reckless courage colliding in my chest. I'm sorry, I said quickly. He studied my face like he was memorizing it. Are you? He asked. I opened my mouth, closed it. No, I don't think so. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not a smile. Something more dangerous. Before I could say anything else, a loud voice cut through the bar. What the hell is this? Daniel. Of course it was Daniel. He stormed toward us, tie loosened, face flushed with anger that looked absurdly out of place after the engagement celebration upstairs. Lena trailed behind him, eyes wide, her ring catching the light with every frantic step. My chest tightened. Daniel pointed at the stranger. Get your hands off her. The stranger didn't move. Didn't even look at him. Instead, he leaned closer to me and spoke softly. Is this the man who hurt you? I nodded once. That was all the answer he needed. The stranger turned slowly, finally acknowledging Daniel's existence. His eyes were calm, but there was something beneath that calm that made my skin prickle. Touch her, he said evenly, and you'll regret it. Daniel scoffed. Who do you think you are? The stranger stepped forward. Just one step. Daniel stopped smiling. You proposed to another woman, the stranger continued, voice low. In public. Then you followed her down here to shout. He tilted his head slightly. That makes you either very stupid or very brave. Daniel opened his mouth. Closed it. For the first time in 3 years I watched him back down. Come on, Lena whispered, tugging at Daniel's sleeve. This is embarrassing. I laughed. It slipped out of me, sharp, broken, uncontrollable. Embarrassing? The stranger's hand returned to my back, warm and steady. We're leaving, he said. Not a question. Outside, the city air hit me hard, cold and real. I sucked in a breath, suddenly shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I'm really sorry, I said again, more quietly this time. I shouldn't have dragged you into that. You didn't, he replied. You chose. That word stuck with me. Chose. He shrugged off his coat and draped it over my shoulders before I could protest. It smelled faintly of clean soap and something deeper, woodsy, expensive, unfamiliar. My name is Kang Junseo, he said. And you shouldn't be alone tonight. I glanced at him. That sounds like a warning. It is. We walked in silence to his car, a sleek black sedan parked slightly away from the others. A man stood nearby, nodding respectfully at Junisio before opening the door. I paused. Do you always have drivers? Junisio looked at me carefully. Only when necessary. The ride was quiet. Too quiet. The city lights blurred past the window as my mind replayed the night on a cruel loop. Daniel's voice, Lena's tears, the ring that was never meant for me. Why didn't you push me away? I asked suddenly. Junisio's gaze flicked to mine. Because you weren't looking for attention. What was I looking for? Escape. The car slowed to a stop in front of a towering building that overlooked the city like it owned it. My stomach flipped. Where are we? Somewhere safe. The elevator ride up was silent again, the air heavy with unspoken questions. When the doors opened, I stepped into a space so clean, so quiet, it felt unreal, floor-to-ceiling windows, dark furniture, soft lights. It didn't feel like a bachelor's apartment. It felt like a fortress. Men stood near the far wall. Guards. My breath caught. Junisio noticed. They won't bother you, he said calmly. They're here for me. That didn't help. He handed me a glass of water, his movements precise, unhurried. Drink. I did. My hands were still shaking. You can stay in the guest room, he continued. Lock the door if it makes you feel better. I studied him, this man who'd stepped into my worst night like he belonged there, who carried authority without raising his voice. Why are you helping me? I asked. He met my gaze, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Because I know what it's like to be betrayed in front of witnesses. That was the moment I realized something was wrong. Not wrong dangerous yet. Wrong deep. I slept that night wrapped in his coat, staring at the ceiling, my heart torn between fear and something far more unsettling. Comfort. I didn't know then that every exit was guarded. Or that my kiss hadn't been impulsive at all. It had been the beginning of a war. I woke up disoriented. For one terrifying second I didn't know where I was, or who I was supposed to be mourning. Then the memories slammed back into place like a door kicked open. The rooftop. The ring. The kiss. The stranger. I sat up abruptly. The room was unfamiliar but immaculate. Neutral colors. Crisp sheets. A faint scent of cedar and something warm, like tea leaves. Morning light filtered in through thick curtains that had been left slightly open, as if someone had deliberately allowed just enough daylight for comfort. I checked the door. Locked. My chest tightened. Then I remembered Junisio's calm voice. Lock it if it makes you feel better. I unlocked it and stepped out. The penthouse was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Not empty, controlled. The city stretched endlessly beyond the windows, distant and small, like something already conquered. I padded into the kitchen. Junio stood at the counter, sleeves rolled to his forearms, pouring tea with careful precision. His movements were unhurried, practiced, like someone who never rushed because the world waited for him. You're awake, he said without turning around. How did you? I heard you move. That alone should have unsettled me. He turned, meeting my eyes, and gestured to the stool across from him. Sit. I hesitated, then sat. Steam curled from the cup he placed in front of me. Drink, he said gently. It helps after shock. I took a sip. He was right. Silence settled between us, not awkward but heavy. The kind that presses on your ribs until you're forced to acknowledge it. You didn't ask me anything last night, I said finally. There was nothing useful to ask, he replied. Pain doesn't need interrogation. That made my throat tighten. I studied him more carefully in the daylight. The sharp lines of his face softened slightly when relaxed, but there was still something distant there. Not cold, guarded. Like a door that opened only inward. Those men, I said quietly. The ones outside. Yes. They weren't bodyguards like celebrities have. No. That was all he offered. I swallowed. So what are you? Junio leaned back against the counter, arms folding loosely. Someone who learned early that calm keeps people alive. That answer chilled me more than any threat could have. I stood. I think I should go. He nodded once. You can. Relief rushed through me until he added, but not yet. I froze. The man you were with followed you last night? He continued evenly. Not me. You. My stomach dropped. Daniel? Yes. And Lena? She stayed behind. That somehow hurt worse. You're safe here, Junio said. But outside, your name is attached to a public scene. People are curious. Curiosity is dangerous. For who? I asked. For anyone unprotected. I laughed softly. You're talking like this is a crime drama. His gaze sharpened. It is. The weight of that word pressed into my chest. I paced toward the window, hugging myself. From this height, the city looked harmless. Tiny cars, tiny people, tiny problems. Why do you live like this? I asked without turning around. Junio was silent for a long moment. Because chaos doesn't knock, he finally said. It crashes. Something about that answer made my skin prickle. Did you know who I was last night? I asked. No. Then why help me? He stepped closer, not into my space but near enough that I felt the shift in air. Because when you kissed me, you weren't trying to hurt him. I frowned. Then what was I doing? You were trying to prove to yourself that you still existed. My breath caught. No one had ever seen me like that before. I turned to face him, my heart suddenly too loud. You don't even know me. I know enough. His gaze flicked briefly to my lips, then back to my eyes. Controlled, deliberate. Made my pulse spike. That's when I noticed something else. The way he stood positioned between me and the open space. The way his phone buzzed, and he silenced it without looking. The way the guards outside never entered but never left. This wasn't hospitality. It was protection. Or containment. What happens if I stay? I asked quietly. Junicio met my eyes. Then you become my responsibility. And if I leave? Then you are on your own. The choice shouldn't have been hard. But my life had already blown apart once in public. I didn't want to shatter again in private. I nodded slowly. Just for today. Junicio inclined his head. Good. Later, as I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, I saw it. Photos. Videos. My boyfriend proposed to my best friend, and his girlfriend lost it. Comments dissected my dress. My reaction. My kiss. A new headline caught my eye. Who is the mystery man? My stomach dropped. I looked up at Junicio. People are asking about you. They will, he said calmly. You're not worried? No. That terrified me. As night fell, I realized something that unsettled me more than the guards, the power, or the danger. I felt calmer here. Safer. And whatever Junicio was, he wasn't a coincidence. He was a turning point, and I was standing right at the edge of him. The first sign that something was wrong was the silence. Not the peaceful kind I had grown used to in Junicio's penthouse, but a sudden, unnatural stillness, like the city itself had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe. We were in the car. Morning traffic flowed below us in neat, obedient lines. Junicio sat beside me in the back seat, scrolling through his phone, expression calm as ever. The driver's eyes flicked repeatedly to the rearview mirror, his jaw tight. I felt it before I understood it. A pressure at the base of my skull. That instinctive awareness you get when you're being watched. Junicio, I murmured, leaning slightly toward him. Are we? Seatbelt, he said. The word wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. But it landed with authority. I snapped the belt into place without thinking. The driver accelerated. That was when the car behind us surged forward. Too fast. Too close. Junicio's phone disappeared into his pocket. Eyes forward, he said quietly. No matter what happens. My mouth went dry. What's happening? He didn't answer. The sound came next. A sharp crack, like fireworks except wrong. Too close. Too violent. The rear window shattered. I screamed. Glass sprayed the back seat as the car swerved violently. The driver cursed under his breath, veering across lanes as horns blared and brakes screeched. Another crack. Another. Bullets. This wasn't an accident. Junicio twisted, his body shielding mine. One arm braced over my chest as the car jolted again. His hand pressed my head down instinctively. Stay down, he ordered. The world became noise and motion. Sirens, tires screaming, the metallic stench of fear filling my lungs. I saw them through the broken glass. Black SUVs. 3 of them. Windows down. Guns raised. Oh my God, I sobbed. Junicio. He was already moving. The car slammed into a sharp turn, nearly flipping. The driver took it with terrifying precision, accelerating into a narrow side street. Another vehicle blocked the exit. We were trapped. The car skidded to a halt. For half a heartbeat there was silence. Then everything exploded. Doors flew open. Men poured out, dressed in black, moving with brutal coordination. Gunfire erupted, deafening, relentless. I curled in on myself, screaming as Junicio pushed me down and covered me completely. Do not move, he said near my ear, his voice ice cold. Do not scream. I felt him tense. Then he was gone. The door opened. I heard him speak, but not the man I knew. His voice was sharp now. Commanding. Lethal. Take her, he said to someone behind me. Now. Strong hands pulled me from the car. A man in black, one of his men, wrapped an arm around me and dragged me backward as bullets ripped through the air. I caught one last glimpse of Junicio. He wasn't hiding. He was walking forward. Into gunfire. Like it belonged to him. Shots rang out, clean, precise. Men dropped. Screams followed. Blood splattered the pavement. This wasn't chaos. It was execution. I was shoved into another vehicle. The door slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. The engine roared to life. I sobbed uncontrollably as we sped away, my hands shaking so violently I could barely breathe. Minutes later, or hours I didn't know, the car stopped. The door opened. Miss, the man said gently. You're safe. Safe. The word felt obscene. I was guided into a building, up elevators, through hallways I barely registered. When the door finally closed behind me, I collapsed onto the floor, hugging my knees, shaking like I'd been pulled from icy water. Blood stained my shoes. Not mine. Time passed. I don't know how much. Then the door opened again. Junicio stepped inside. His white shirt was splattered red. His knuckles were raw. A shallow cut traced his jawline. My heart slammed against my ribs. You're hurt, I whispered. He shook his head once. Not badly. I scrambled to my feet and rushed to him before I could think better of it, my hands hovering uselessly near his chest. "I thought you were dead," I cried. "I thought." He caught my wrist gently, grounding me. "Look at me," he said. I did. His eyes were steady. Alive. "Tell me the truth," I said, my voice breaking. "All of it." He was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly. "My family controls one of the largest underground syndicates in South Korea," he said. "Weapons, shipping, information." My knees nearly gave out. "Your Mafia?" he finished calmly. The word hit like a gunshot. "I was born into it," he continued. "I was raised to lead it." I tried to step away. That was a mistake. I stared at him, my mind screaming, "Run." But my body wouldn't move. "The moment you kissed me," he said quietly, "you became visible." My breath hitched. "To who?" "To my enemies." Tears streamed down my face. "Then why didn't you send me away?" "Because they would have followed you." Silence swallowed the room. "You should be terrified of me," Junio added. I laughed weakly through tears. "I am." "Good," he said softly. "Fear keeps you alive." I looked at his blood-stained hands. "Did you kill them?" "Yes." The honesty in his voice terrified me more than denial ever could. I sank onto the couch, my entire body trembling. "This isn't my world," I whispered. "No," he agreed. "But you're in it now." He knelt in front of me slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal. "I will protect you," he said. "But only if you stay with me." "And if I don't?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Then I can't promise you'll survive." The truth sat between us, ugly, brutal, undeniable. I had kissed a stranger to escape humiliation, and woken up inside a war. I looked at him, this man of blood and control, this calm monster who had shielded me with his own body. "I need time," I whispered. He nodded. "Take it." As he stood, I realized something that chilled me deeper than fear. The danger didn't start when the bullets flew. It started when I began to wonder, what if I didn't want to leave? The house didn't have windows. Not in the way normal houses did. There were openings, yes, but they were narrow, reinforced, designed more for light than for escape. The walls were thick. The doors were silent. Every corner felt deliberate, measured, planned by someone who had learned the hard way that the world could not be trusted. Junio called it a safe residence. I called it a beautiful prison. The first night there, I didn't sleep. I lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling as unfamiliar silence pressed against my ears. No city noise. No sirens. No laughter from strangers on the street below. Just stillness, broken only by the soft sound of footsteps outside my door every hour. Guards. Always guards. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to slow my breathing. "You're alive," I reminded myself. "You're alive because of him." That thought should have comforted me. Instead, it tangled fear and gratitude so tightly together I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The door opened softly sometime near dawn. I bolted upright. "It's me," Junio said quietly. He stood in the doorway holding a tray, tea, toast, fruit. His hair was damp, his shirt clean, his face scrubbed of blood and exhaustion. If not for the faint bruise near his collarbone, he could have been any man bringing breakfast to a guest. But I knew better now. "You didn't sleep," I said. "No. Neither did I." He nodded once and set the tray on the table. "You should eat." I laughed weakly. "You sound like that's a command." "It is," he replied, then softened his tone. "But not a cruel one." I hesitated before taking the cup from him. My fingers brushed his. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through me. He noticed. His hand stilled, then slowly withdrew as if reminding himself of a boundary he'd drawn and refused to cross. "You're safe here," he said again, like repetition might make it true. "Safe from who?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. "From them," he said finally. "And from the version of me I become when I'm careless." That unsettled me more than any threat. Days blurred together. I wasn't locked in my room. I could walk the halls, sit in the garden courtyard, read books that appeared whenever I mentioned wanting one. Every meal was prepared carefully. Every request, fulfilled before I finished speaking. Yet every step was watched. Every door had weight. Every night, Junio checked the locks himself. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. He never touched me without permission. Never raised his voice. Never lied when I asked questions, though he often answered less than I wanted. I learned he drank tea instead of coffee. That he slept only 4 hours a night. That he hated loud celebrations and public affection. That he carried guilt like a second spine. One night, as rain tapped against the narrow windows, I asked, Do you regret meeting me? He paused mid-pour. No. The answer came too quickly. That wasn't what I asked, I said. He set the teapot down carefully. Then ask what you mean. Do I make your life harder? He met my gaze. You make it honest. That stole my breath. I started noticing things then. How he positioned himself between me and doors. How his eyes tracked every new guard. How his phone buzzed endlessly, and how he silenced it when I entered the room. One evening, I overheard raised voices through a partially open door. She's a weakness, a man said sharply. They'll use her. Junisio's reply was cold enough to freeze bone. Touch her and you'll learn what weakness really is. Silence followed. Later that night, I confronted him. They're afraid of me, I said. They should be, he replied. I frowned. Why? Because you matter. The realization hit me slowly like water filling a cracked glass. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't protection until things calmed down. Junio wasn't waiting for danger to pass. He was reshaping his world around me. Junio, I whispered one night as we stood side by side in the courtyard. What am I to you? The question hung between us, heavy and fragile. He didn't touch me. He didn't look away. You are the first person who looked at me without knowing who I was, he said, and still chose me. My chest ached. I kissed you because I was breaking, I said, not because I saw you. And yet, he replied quietly, you didn't let go. Something shifted then, subtle, irreversible. The danger outside didn't fade. But inside those walls, something else grew. Trust, desire, attachment sharp enough to hurt. The night it became undeniable, the power went out. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the house in shadows. Guards moved quickly. Orders were given in low, controlled voices. I stood frozen in the hallway. Junicio reached me in seconds. Stay with me, he said firmly. The lights returned. Nothing happened. But my hands were shaking. Without thinking, I reached for his sleeve. He stilled. Slowly, carefully, he covered my hand with his. Tell me to stop, he said softly. I didn't. He pulled me into his chest, not possessively, not desperately. Just enough to steady me. I felt his heartbeat, strong, controlled, real. For the first time since the rooftop, I cried without shame. I don't know who I am anymore, I whispered. You're someone who survived, he replied. That's enough. When he let go, he stepped back first. That restraint terrified me more than hunger ever could, because it meant when he finally chose, it would be absolute. Lying in bed that night, I realized the truth I had been avoiding. I wasn't trapped here. I was staying. And the most dangerous thing about Kang Juniso wasn't the blood on his hands. It was the way he made me feel like the world outside no longer existed. The mistake wasn't trusting Junicio. The mistake was believing his enemies would play by his rules. Started with something small. Too small to notice at first. The guard rotation changed. The tea tasted slightly different. Junicio's phone rang more often, and he stopped answering it in front of me. I felt it in my bones before I understood it in my head. The sense of being watched sharpened. The air inside the house grew tense, stretched thin like a wire pulled too tight. Something's wrong, I said one evening as we stood in the courtyard. Junicio's eyes flicked to the shadows instinctively. Yes. That single word made my stomach drop. You're not telling me something. No, he said quietly. I'm trying not to make you afraid. I laughed bitterly. That ship sailed the day I watched you walk into gunfire. He didn't smile. That night he didn't leave my side. Not once. I woke just before dawn to the sound of screaming metal. Not screaming, breaking. The lights went out. The house shook. I sat bolt upright, heart slamming so hard it hurt. Before I could reach the door, it burst open. Not Junicio. Hands grabbed me. A cloth pressed to my mouth. I tried to scream. Darkness swallowed me whole. I woke to pain. Not sharp, dull, spreading, pulsing through my wrists and ankles. Concrete beneath me. Cold. Damp. A single light flickered overhead. I was tied to a chair. Panic surged, hot and choking, but I forced myself to breathe. Think. Survive. Footsteps echoed. A man stepped into the light. He smiled. Ah, you're awake. I didn't recognize him, but something about the way he stood told me everything I needed to know. Power. Confidence. Cruelty wrapped in patience. You must be very special, he continued conversationally. Kang Junicio does not make mistakes like you. My throat felt raw. If you're here for him, you won't get what you want through me. The man chuckled. Everyone says that. He circled me slowly. Do you know how many men have tried to hurt Kang Junicio? He asked. Do you know how many succeeded? I stayed silent. None, he said softly. Until you. Fear crawled up my spine. You see, he continued, leaning down until his face was inches from mine, he is very careful with his enemies. His smile widened. But he is careless with what he loves. The word loves hit harder than any blow. Before I could respond, the warehouse doors exploded open. Gunfire tore through the space. Men shouted, screamed. The man in front of me cursed and backed away. Then I saw him. Junicio. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He walked in like death had already signed the room's papers. His eyes found me instantly. Something in his expression broke. The warehouse became chaos, shots ringing out, bodies hitting the ground, the smell of blood thick in the air. Junicio moved with terrifying efficiency. Every shot precise. Every motion controlled. Not rage. Purpose. When he reached me, the room was silent. He dropped to his knees in front of me, hands shaking for the first time I'd ever seen. I'm here, he said hoarsely. I'm here. He cut the restraints himself. The moment I was free, I collapsed into him. His arms wrapped around me like steel. I thought you were dead, I sobbed. I thought. I will burn the world before I let that happen, he said into my hair. Behind us, someone groaned. Junicio looked up slowly. The man who'd spoken to me earlier lay bleeding but alive. Junicio stood. I had never been afraid of him before that moment. You touched her, Junio said quietly. The man laughed weakly. You came, didn't you? I knew you would. Junicio didn't answer. He raised his gun. I grabbed his arm. Junicio. He looked at me. Really looked. What he did ends tonight, he said. I shook my head, tears streaming. Don't let him turn you into this. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't listen. Then he lowered the gun. To the man, he said coldly, You live. Relief flickered across the man's face. So you can tell everyone, Junio continued, what happens when they touch what is mine. He turned away. The scream came seconds later. I didn't look back. After that night, nothing was the same. Junicio changed. Not into a monster. Into a king. His operations consolidated. His enemies disappeared or bowed. The syndicate moved with ruthless unity. And I was no longer hidden. I was acknowledged. Every guard knew my name. Every meeting paused when I entered the room. Fear followed me like a shadow. So did respect. One night, standing on the balcony of a new safe house overlooking the ocean, I asked him the question that had been burning my chest. If I had died, I whispered, what would you have done? Junicio didn't hesitate. I would have ended everything, he said, including myself. Tears filled my eyes. You can't love me like that, I said. I already do. He stepped closer but stopped himself. Always that control. Always that line he refused to cross unless I invited him. You are no longer leverage, he said softly. You are my reason. I realized then the truth that terrified me more than guns or enemies ever could. I had survived being used as bait. But surviving being loved by Kong Junicio. That was the real danger. The world didn't magically become safe after the blood dried. That was the first lie I had to unlearn. Power didn't erase danger. It only changed its shape. The weeks after my kidnapping passed in a strange haze. We moved again, this time to a place that overlooked the ocean. The waves crashed endlessly below the cliffs, relentless and loud enough to drown out thought. Junicio said it was temporary. Everything with him was temporary. Until it wasn't. I watched him from a distance as he ruled his world. Meetings behind closed doors, guards snapping to attention at his slightest nod, men twice his age bowing their heads when he spoke. He never raised his voice. He never needed to. Yet when he turned toward me, all that power softened. That scared me more than his violence ever had. You don't belong in this, I said one night as we stood side by side, the wind whipping my hair across my face. Junicio didn't look at me. Neither did you belong to that man who humiliated you. That doesn't mean I belong to you. He nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. The silence between us stretched, heavy with everything we were both afraid to say. I started receiving messages again. Daniel apologized first, long, self-pitying paragraphs about confusion and love and mistakes. Lena followed with tears and explanations and justifications that tasted like betrayal all over again. I deleted them all. Not because I was angry anymore, but because I was done letting other people define me. One morning, I asked Junicio for a phone without restrictions. The guard stiffened. He dismissed them with a glance. You can leave, he told me. Anytime. The words stunned me. No tracking. I asked. No protection? There will always be consequences, he said. But the choice must be yours. For the first time since the rooftop, I felt like I could breathe. I left the estate that afternoon alone. The city felt different now, Smaller, louder, more fragile. People brushed past me unaware of how close I'd come to dying, to disappearing entirely. I spent the day walking, thinking, grieving the girl I'd been before betrayal hardened her spine. By nightfall I knew the truth. I returned not because I was trapped, but because I was choosing. Junicio was waiting when I came back. Not pacing, not anxious, just standing by the window like he'd known. "I thought you might not return," he said quietly. "I thought so too." He turned toward me. "And? I won't pretend your world doesn't frighten me," I said. "It does. Every day." He nodded once. "But I won't run just because love isn't safe," I continued. "I've already lived that kind of half-life." His jaw tightened, not with anger but emotion carefully leashed. "This won't be easy," he said. "I don't want easy," I replied. "I want honest." For the first time since we met, he closed the distance between us without hesitation. Not in desperation. In certainty. He didn't kiss me right away. He rested his forehead against mine, breathing me in like grounding. "I will never cage you," he said. "Even if losing you destroys me. That's the only reason I'm here," I whispered. When he kissed me then, it wasn't born of revenge or survival. It was a vow. Months later the world shifted again. The Kong Syndicate restructured. Cleaner fronts, fewer civilian casualties, alliances reshaped under Junicio's unyielding rules. His enemies didn't disappear. They adapted. So did we. I learned how to protect myself. How to read rooms. How to stand beside power without losing my reflection in it. And one evening, quiet, private, far from cameras and crowds, Junicio did something unexpected. He didn't kneel. He didn't bring a ring. He poured tea. "You were humiliated in public once," he said. "I won't repeat that cruelty." He reached into his pocket and placed a simple band on the table between us. "No witnesses," he continued. "No pressure. No debt. Just a choice. If you stay," he said softly, "it is because you want me. Not my protection. Not my world." My throat tightened. "I kissed a stranger to prove I still existed," I said. "I didn't know he would become the man who taught me how to choose myself again." I picked up the ring and slid it onto my finger. Not because I was owned, but because I was free. Junicio exhaled, slow, unsteady, human. Outside the ocean roared endlessly. Inside for the first time I felt something rare and dangerous and entirely mine. She didn't win by being saved. She won by surviving betrayal, standing in the presence of power, and choosing love without losing herself. And the man who ruled the shadows? He bowed only to one thing. Her choice.